campaign without the D&D. And then the action system, don't even get me started on that. Well, he's not wrong. So let's get me started on that. So when I was cutting and editing for my tier list video and Neverwinter came up, one thing that I did not really like that I did was that I didn't explain why I didn't like the action combat system in Neverwinter. Being that, yes, he was absolutely correct in that most people do, or at least the majority of players, past and present, do actually really enjoy that combat system and call it the high point of the game, almost the main reason for the game. And I should have elaborated a little bit more, but I was cutting into a lot of time, and I was spending a lot of time going into my backstory with Dungeons and Dragons, and why I was disappointed by Neverwinter because of the IP that it was using. So I downloaded the game to get some footage, to play it a little bit, to show you guys what I'm talking about. But then what I was reminded of is all of the reasons I don't like Neverwinter. And I'm going to go into detail on everything. And it all loops back into why the action combat doesn't fit the game. So in my tier list video, I dive deep into kind of my experience with Dungeons and Dragons in the Forgotten Realms. And I go into a lot of detail as far as what I expected out of Neverwinter when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. One of my biggest gripes in Neverwinter and why the combat system doesn't work is that Cryptic took an IP that's half a century old, that has established rule books over the course of half that century, since 1974, and then did not follow any of it. You can't just slap that onto the box and say it's a D&D game if you don't have the elements to establish it as a D&D game. What they did with Neverwinter was add a bunch of nouns that we would be familiar with in the Forgotten Realms based off of our previous experience with even just the Bioware games, Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, Icewind Dale. But what separated the Bioware games from this Neverwinter game was a strong attention to sticking with the rule books. Now I understand that Dungeons and Dragons as a medium versus video games as a medium do not translate well when you cross them over in terms of fun. And you can see that in Larian Studios because they are using homebrew rules in Baldur's Gate 3 to create that fun. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to talk to a DM at a table and say, as a berserker, I grab a hold of a man by his neck, and with my muscles flexing and every fiber of my body going into the grip around his neck, I slam him into a table and squeeze the life out of him. Video games have a set rules where it has to be programmed, whereas Dungeons and Dragons is only limited by your imagination. However, what games like Baldur's Gate 2, Icewind Dale, Neverwinter Nights, and even now the Baldur's Gate 3 that's soon to release, there is a strong adherence to the rule set, whether it's second AD&D or it's 5th edition, even with the homebrew. Their main focus is to make sure that their games feel and play like a Dungeons and Dragons game. With Neverwinter, they just threw away all of that. They used the nouns of cities, towns, and locales and enemies and magic that we recognize, but they don't bring with it any semblance to call it a Dungeons and Dragons game. to call it Neverwinter. So where Neverwinter falls very, very short is that you could take its mechanics, you could take everything that it does, you could take the entire game, slap a different name on it, change all the names and the characters in the game, but don't change anything from how they look, how they sound, what they do. You don't have to change anything about the gameplay, just name everything differently, and you largely get the same game and you wouldn't notice. Whereas if you were to play Baldur's Gate and change all the names, you would still think, man, this really feels like a Dungeons and Dragons game. When you look at a game like Baldur's Gate that came out in 1998, when real-time strategy games are all the rave, they were able to take a combat system from a real-time strategy game where it's top-down isometric and you move the characters around like a RTS, like StarCraft, like Warcraft. And then you add that real-time element to the Dungeons and Dragons element. You get something like real-time with pause. This combat system, while not being exactly Dungeons and Dragons, still followed all the rules of Dungeons and Dragons because it was still utilizing that round-based combat where you get this many attacks per round versus what you would see in a action combat system where you're just clicking away, and that's what you do. You click away, you're swinging your sword, you're doing your magic. There is no element of I leveled up, so I'm going to now get more attacks, or I'm going to now get more spells. You basically just stay the same the entire time. Your spells just do more damage. Your items just do more damage. On top of that, these older games, and even looking ahead to Baldur's Gate 3, they use the damage numbers of dice rolls, just like in the handbook. A longsword does 1d8 damage. Take a look at Neverwinter's damage. Does that damage look like Dungeons and Dragons? Does that feel like Dungeons and Dragons? But then you take a look at Baldur's Gate and you're hitting something for 14 damage. You're like, holy shit, I just hit that thing for 14 damage. Like, that's a lot. And then your build comes into play, and then now your Thakos come into play, and you're hitting more consistently, you're hitting faster, you're feeling that natural progression as a warrior. Or as a fighter, or you have 9th level spells unlocked as a mage, and now you can do a time stop, and you feel powerful, you feel godlike, you feel like Elminster the mage. Or if you're an evil character and you decide to attack Dritz, well, now you're a dick. That's right, I fucking said it. You're a dick. And that's where Neverwinter falls off. They replaced the feeling of Dungeons and Dragons, the numbers of Dungeons and Dragons, with a nice little coat of paint, and then said, hey, we're going to just do the same combat system that everybody has, and we're going to make it as fun as possible. Now, I don't have a problem with action combat, but in the context of Dungeons and Dragons, which is why I picked up Neverwinter back in the day, why I was so excited to play Neverwinter back in the day, was because I was going to finally get a Dungeons and Dragons game set in a universe that I was very, very familiar with, being that I've read so many books from that universe. And then it disappointed. So, and that's where my focus was on my tier list is, and that's why I go off on that tangent about the Forgotten Realms, about Dungeons and Dragons, and how it's been such a major part of my life, and then basically shit all over Neverwinter, because it doesn't hit any of those. It just did, hey, this is what's popular in MMOs, Terra did it, like, we're just gonna do it. And that compiled on top of the fact that MMOs at the time were doing these massive open worlds, like World of Warcraft Mists of Pandaria had just dropped, and you could go all over this entire world wherever you wanted to go. This huge theme park. They didn't have the module system, even though you did module over into the expansion. And you could go on these adventures where Neverwinter it felt very old for the time that it was coming out. So what would have been a perfectly acceptable combat system in the world of Neverwinter? I think keeping some kind of dice roll in the combat system, like in how weapon damage is calculated. And you can see this in something like Dungeons and Dragons Online, where they still kept it true to form, even with the action combat. And then I really think that a tab targeting system would have been the best case scenario for the game when it comes to making it feel like I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons, but online in the world of Neverwinter, or in the world of the Forgotten Realms. And then having those dice rolls come into play to whether or not you hit and for how much damage you hit for, if it was a glancing blow or if you hit for a critical strike. And then the character builds and the power that you gain through leveling up and how you, what classes you're leveling up as you go along. I think that would have been a much more acceptable way to create a combat system while making it feel like it's going round and round and round and round. So it's not exactly real time with pause, but it is still real time, and that real time is based off of rounds. And so if you have somebody tab targeted and you walk over to them and you start auto attacking that person, you're going to attack at the speed of the rounds that you're able to attack. Whether it's, hey, I only get 1/3 attack per round, then yeah, you're going to attack slow because you're a level 1 character and you suck. And if you're not hitting anything, well, yeah, you're still going to suck. But when you do get, to level 3, to level 4, level 5, you're going to start feeling that power right away. You're going to start feeling really good about your character. You're going to have agency and a connection to that character. And it's going to feel really good to play. Instead of the hey, I'm going to jump in and click my mouse a bunch of times and see things blow up and then see loot explode everywhere. It just does not feel like Dungeons and Dragons, and that's why I do not like the action combat system that Cryptic has created for that game. For any other game, the system that they have does feel good. It is fun. So if you're going in not thinking it's a Dungeons and Dragons game, or having no knowledge of Dungeons and Dragons or any of the games that precede it, the masterpieces of Baldur's Gate 2 or the Ballspawn Saga, or Icewind Dale, even Neverwinter Nights, you're going to have a good time. And that's why I put it in the good section. But after loading it up for this video to get this content, I was greeted with a lot of things that I hate. So let's talk about that. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time with this video, so I'm just going to go right through everything that I hate that I noticed right away. Currencies. Holy shit, there's a lot of currencies in this game, and I don't know what any of them are. It's just overloaded with currencies. And that just leads me to believe that it's doing things that just trying to keep you playing, right? Keep you spending. The prevalence of the cash shop. The daily reward chest, where it's like, hey, I know our game sucks, but if you log in every day, we'll give you something. Might not be anything good, might not be anything useful, but we're gonna give you something. Then there's the overload of items, the overload of stackable items, having 50 of this item, 50 of that item, and all these items do something, but nothing is really doing anything different to change my gameplay or change the fun of the game. And then the level up chest, and this is something I can't stand. Stop doing this. Stop doing this, game developers or publishers or whoever is in charge of making this system. The level up chest is a reward for you to level up. It just gives you a bunch of random shit. Usually things that are supposed to help you continue on your journey. If your game is fun, if it has a rewarding level up system, you do not need to have a dopamine bait, a little carrot on a stick to keep people playing. You don't have to keep enticing people to come back to your game by giving them free shit every day that they log on. And that drives me nuts. And I'm glad to see that a lot of the Forgotten Realms areas are now explorable, but they're in little modules. But now you have just so many different things to manage, and it's becoming more and more like a checklist, and I don't like checklists. And that's coming from a guy who just loaded up BDO again, Black Desert Online, because I really want to play some Arena of Solaire. Not because I want to go through the checklist or get the daily free loot. I can't stand that stuff. And I say that every time I'm on stream with Guild Wars 2 is, oh, hey, look, I got my daily loot. And now I have even more bags of stuff in my inventory that I don't want or don't need. Those are just a quick rundown of all the things that I noticed right off the bat that I do not like about Neverwinter. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm not hating on that comment. In fact, I'm embracing that comment. I am always looking for constructive criticism on my videos, and I'm always looking for a way to have these discussions, because this is something I'm passionate about. I'm very passionate about video games. It's been in my life since I was 3 years old, dating all the way back to Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo and Nintendo. And then, you know, my dad being a heavy D&D nerd, that has always just been part of my upbringing. So it's something I'm very, very passionate about, and that has been in my life for a very long time. So having a community of people who want to have these discussions and are looking to criticize me or give me their opinion, even if it doesn't align with me, is what I'm looking for. So thank you for this comment, because it did lead to this video. And other than that, have a great day. Bye.